Bismillah.
Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. First off, thank you all for attending this evening's session that we'll be going over Khums, the Islamic tax. Just at the preliminary, so we're going to have about an hour's session followed by a Q&A to address any questions you already have in mind or any that you come across during the presentation. In case your question is not already answered during the session, please do make a note, and you can ask your questions on Slido using the event code 786110. Alternatively, you can ask your questions on the YouTube live chat. This session is not intended on proving Khums. We all understand Khums as being a religious obligation, and hence I don't know what you feel, Shaykh, but I don't think we need to go into the defense and prove obligation of Khums within our teachings.
Inshallah,
And
we'll
of course,
focus
we'll
on
leave
the
it
ahkam. Yes.
at what you feel comfortable with. Inshallah, inshallah. So today we have been blessed and privileged to have with us Shaykh Abbas Malik. Shaykh was born and brought up in the United Kingdom and has studied fiqh extensively in the holy city of Qum, I believe, Shaykh.
Najaf.
In Najaf, okay, a holy city of Najaf. So we thank you, Shaykh, for joining us today and agreeing to impart your knowledge and wisdom with us. Before we start, Shaykh, if we can have Brother Haider Ali to start off with the recitation of a few verses of the Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث صدق الله العلي العظيم مع الصلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وسيد المرسلين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله عز وجل في كتابه المجيد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم واعلموا أنما غنمتم من شيء فأن لله خمسه وللرسول ولذي القربى واليتامى والمساكين وابن السبيل صدق الله العلي العظيم. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, in this brief seminar on Khums, we will go through a number of key and important masail and ahkam of Khums. But in proceeding to do so, I want to remind you all that these ahkam of Khums and these rulings of Khums are something very important, and we need to refer to the books of Islamic law, whatever language they're printed in Arabic, in Farsi, in English. They're all available, and it's all available also on the internet. We won't be able to go into every single mas'ala because that will take us hours. However, inshallah, I will give an overview of the main ahkam, and inshallah we'll proceed on to the hukum, the new fatwa of Samahat Sayyid Ayatollah al-Udma Sayyid Ali Sistani about the mortgages or the loans, inshallah, so that that matter can be clarified as well. So without further ado, and bear in mind that all of these ahkam, all of these masail are based on the fatawa, the edicts of Ayatollah al-Udma Sayyid Ali Sistani, Hafidhullah. I don't want to, as the brother mentioned, explain the wujub of khums is something that we believe in, and it is a part of the wajibat, and we must pay it. And briefly speaking, we have this verse of the Holy Quran, which I recited, in which the khums is obligated and prescribed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and a mention of the Sahm al-Imam and Sahm al-Sadat portions of them are also mentioned in this verse. In regards to the importance of khums, there's one particular riwayah that I decided to put in here just so that we understand how important it is and how a great effect it has in our lives. Imam al-Rida alayhi salam, he said when he wrote to a Shia trader who lived in Khurasan in Persia, he wanted to be let off from paying khums. He asked him that, can you let me off? Can I be free of any liability? Imam al-Rida alayhi salam responded in writing by saying that khums brings assistance to the imams and the religion of Islam. So if we have love for the imams, if we have love for Islam, then we should pay it. Do not make yourself deprived from our du'as by failure to pay khums. So khums will bring the du'as for us, inshallah, from the imams alayhimu salatu wasalam. Will receive their shafa'at. And also paying khums is the key to your rizq. Don't think that paying it will decrease your wealth. It is the key to your increase in your rizq, in your sustenance. It is also a means by which we can attain purification from our sins. It's a means of preparation for the day of judgment. And the Muslim, the one who has truly submitted in the truest sense, is the one who fulfills his vows to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not one who simply claims things by the tongue. We just don't say, we are Shia, we are the lovers of the Ahl al-Bayt, we are the followers of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salatu was-salam, while we also then oppose them in our actions by failure to do all of the wajibat, including khums. So in this letter, Imam al-Rida alayhi salam has explained very beautifully how important khums is. So in brief, it purifies one's income, it allows the lawful use of income, it purifies one's offspring as well. There are riwayat which mentioned all of these things. It removes poverty from the Sayyids, of course, and it brings the guarantee of Jannah, inshallah. So with that in mind, of course, khums is 1/5 of the savings that we have. This is what it literally means. It means 1/5, which is 20%. That 20% is divided into two halves. Sahm al-Imam alayhi salam, which is the portion mentioned in the Quran, the portion of Allah, the Messenger, and the Ahl al-Bayt alayhimus salam. And Sahm al-Sadat is the portion of the Hashemites, the Bani Hashim, who are orphans, poor, or stranded travelers. So the question first that arises in the ahkam of khums is, what is it obligatory upon? It's obligatory upon 6 things, and I mentioned these here: the spoils of war, mined minerals, treasure troves that one digs up, precious stones obtained from underwater diving, and lawful property that has been mixed with unlawful property. There's certain ahkam related to that. But what I will be focusing on exclusively is the last one, which is the profits or the savings from earnings and income during the year. There's a lot to go through, so inshallah I'll be as comprehensive as possible. and cover all points. And if there are any questions, please note them down or send them in the app as mentioned by the brother. So who must pay the khums? All people, whether they are employed or unemployed, must pay khums. Okay, it is not an excuse that you are unemployed. If you receive anything as a gift, as benefits, as anything, then you are to pay khums if any of that remains over the year. And whether you are rich or poor. If you are poor and you only have, let's say, £5 at the end of the year or $5 at the end of the year, then that pound has to be paid in khums, which is the 1/5. It still has to be paid for your rizq to become halal. And male and female, old and young, and adult and child as well. Okay, just because a person is non-baligh, it doesn't mean that the khums obligation is not upon him or her. The khums must be paid by the child via the wali, for example, the father. Okay, so the wali will have the authority then to pay the khums on behalf of the child. So if the child gets Eidi, gets gifts, and that remains unused, and the year passes, then the wali should be taking account of all of this and making the payment of khums when the date arrives. So when must the khums be paid? It must be paid on your specific khums date. Okay, whatever that khums date is, it must be paid there. There are certain allowances for when one may delay it and set it aside, but generally speaking, the obligation is when that date comes. What is that date? This is a very important point, especially for the followers of Sayyid Sistani, that if you are working and earning a living, okay, you have some kind of work, some job, some profession, there's something that you do and you earn a living, or not the whole living, but a substantial part of it, at least, for example, half of the provisions that you need for your household, you're gaining it from that, either as an employee or in any trade or business. So if this is your situation, then the date that you started earning a living, okay, you'll have to go back and figure out when it was, when you started earning a living. That's when you have to start paying khums. That is your khums date. So whenever that date comes, and every year, then you should pay the khums then. If you can't remember, and you'll be going along a particular khums date that you have set for yourself, then you should get permission from the Hakim Shar'i, the Marja or his Wakil, just to make sure that everything is fine in that respect. Okay, but this is for someone who is working, who has a job. Okay, someone who's working maybe a couple of hours a week, a couple of hours a month, that isn't sufficient. It needs to be something sufficient and substantial, and there needs to be a substantial amount of income from that. But if you are not doing so, if you don't have such a work or job, and you're not earning a living, for example, if you stay at home, you're a parent, you're a stay-at-home mother or a stay-at-home father, or you're a student, you're not working to earn your living. You might do so. So then if you do so, then you come under the first category. But if you are a full-time student and you don't work sufficiently, or you don't work at all, then you come into the second category. Or if you're unemployed, or if you are retired, or if any such circumstances where you are not earning a living, what is your khums date? There is no one fixed khums date. Every income will have its own khums date, okay, exactly a year after receiving it. For example, let's say today, sorry, this was the date is incorrect, of course, but let's say you receive £100 today, okay, which is the 30th of January 2021. The khums on that £100, or whatever remains from it. Let's say you spend £50, only £50 is left, or you have it's all of it is still there with you, that £100. Then you will need to pay khums or whatever that is, when next year on the 30th of January 2022. And then if I receive something a week from now, another £100 or so, then the following year I will, on that particular date, the 5th or the 6th of February, I will pay the khums from that amount. So every income will have its own khums date. So we have to figure out, first of all, that which category we fall under. And then we will pay the khums accordingly. And it doesn't matter whether you go by the Islamic date, the Islamic calendar, or the Western Gregorian calendar. You make sure that the date is the date that you have to pay. There are certain things that khums is not liable upon, and many things that khums is liable upon. But most of the things upon which khums is liable upon, they are there, and these are the exceptions. So that's why I brought this forward here, that first we look at these, at the mahar, the dowry received by a wife is not liable for any khums. Okay, even if she doesn't use it or nothing, it just remains there, sits there for the rest of her life, there is no khums to be payable upon that. And then inheritance in accordance with the laws of Islam, or expected inheritance, that is not liable for any khums. Any diya that is paid, which is compensatory money as defined by the Sharia. Let's say you're, God forbid, you're in a car accident and there's some insurance payment coming through. Only that amount that is in accordance to the ahkam of the Sharia pertaining to the diyat will be khums free. If there is an excess amount that you are receiving because of any injury that you have received from the accident, then that will be khumsable. Khums needs to be paid upon that. And loans, khums is not liable upon loans, and I'll go into the loans later, inshallah. And any gifts that haven't been received. I'm mentioning this in particular because sometimes gifts haven't been received. And let's say I buy a gift for someone today, and my khums date is coming, and I still have it. I haven't passed possession of it. I may have called them up and said, I have a gift for you here. Because of, let's say, COVID-19 restrictions, I can't come and drop it off, and I can't, pass possession over to you. Then I will still be liable for khums for that, if my khums date comes by. So any gifts that haven't been received, they won't have to pay khums on that, because it is not a gift that is received and that is taken possession of. So what income is liable for khums? Everything else, basically. So any salaries that you are getting, any income from trade, business and investments, gifts, any gifts that we receive, there's khums on that. Any stipends that we are getting from the government, from parents, from anyone else, from any other institutes, which are like grants given for students and the like. And any pensions that we are receiving, because we are retired, we're not working, or any welfare and alms that we are getting, any kind of prizes or bonuses that we have gained, or any unexpected legacy that someone has left some property for you that you haven't expected, that is not really in accordance to the laws of the Sharia as such. So all of that will be liable for khums. Now, what income is liable for khums? Now, we've already seen the list of things, but there's a few other masail, that whatever is left, okay, the things that you have gained, the ahadith tell us that instantly there is an attachment of the liability of khums on it. But through the karam of Allah, through the lutf and the generosity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has allowed us to use whatever we have gained and then only pay the khums of what remains at the khums date after a year, or when the khums date comes by. Okay, so if all the expenses that year are deductible expenses, as we'll see, basically, and inshallah most of it or all of it is under this category of deductible expenses, then it's whatever you have left. So whatever you have spent, there's nothing that's haram. Okay, although you have to then see what you have acquired but haven't used. So if you have acquired a few things and you haven't used them, it could be something like you have some cloth that you have to be it has to be tailored. There's something else that you have and it hasn't been used, then you'll need to pay khums on that. For example, clothes, if they're clothes or cloths that are to be tailored, any toys that you might have left for that, for example, if there is a sale, you bought a few things to give as a gift later on, but before that the khums date comes, then the khums will be payable on those toys, on books that you haven't read, food supplies. Okay, so if you have bought something and you haven't used, and it has a value at the time that the khums date comes, it has a particular value, then that value is the value of all of these things will be liable for khums. So I mentioned here that there are deductible expenses, and these are basically any expenses for oneself and dependents for that year. So inshallah we'll go into that further. There's a particular question on that point, that it should be for that year, the expenses for that year, that are reasonable or necessary. They don't have to be necessary. The fact that they are reasonable, the fact that they are within your standard of living, they're not excessive, they are not a waste, and also that they are not haram. An expense is not haram. You haven't, for example, bought anything that is haram. You haven't, li'adha billah, have gambled it or done anything else with it that is haram. Or so those, anything apart from that, that is haram, will be deductible expenses. And this includes all of these things, food and drink, clothing, accommodation, whether it is rent or mortgage, or lease payments, furniture and household goods, decorative items at home as well. Okay, you can buy things and to decorate the house in a reasonable manner. That's fine. Marriage costs for oneself and dependents. If someone wants to get married and it has a certain cost, of course there will be, and these are all reasonable expenses. Any taxes, any penalties that you have to pay to the government or to any other organizations, any charity, any sadaqah that you give as well, provided it's within your means, you're not being excessive in giving, that you fail to look after yourself and your family. So charity and sadaqah and such things are also exempt. They are allowed and deductible expenses. Traveling, if you want to travel and go for a holiday, go for hajj, go for ziyarah, whatever again is reasonable for you in your situation. Gifts for friends and family and others, neighbors, and for the maintaining of guests. You have guests, so you're going to stock up with certain things. You're going to have certain kind of cutlery or special things for guests, if that is the norm, if that is a standard that you live by. And also then the payment of Islamic obligations, like you've done a vow to Allah, and you have to pay it. You have to pay something. So that's what you have to pay. If you have a kafara to pay because you haven't fasted or any other thing that causes the kafara, that will need to be paid, and that is a deductible expense. Any fidya that you need to pay. The repayment of loans, if you have a loan, and again, I'll go through the loans, inshallah, towards the end of this seminar. If you're paying back loans, that is deductible. Insurance, as long as it's reasonable and normal for a person in your status. Medical expenses, education, bills, even toys for children, or halal entertainment and enjoyment. Membership dues if you're going to the like a particular club, or if you have a membership fee for the center, anything that is halal, of course. Okay, and if there are any legal costs, for example, if you're stuck in some legal issue, then all of these things, and you can think of further things as well, as long as they are reasonable, okay, and they are not haram. And this differs from place to place, from time to time, because over time things have changed, or what is normal, what is a decent standard of living, and so on, and it changes from place to place as well. There are different habits, different norms in different places. So there are a few questions that I want to go through quickly. The first question is, what about large expenses over many years for future usage? Okay, so there are certain things such as the jahez of the daughter who parents wish to marry, inshallah, in the future, marry off. So they want to accumulate those things gradually over the years, because it is difficult to do so all at once. Or, for example, someone is gradually building a house, and first they'll buy the land in the first year, in the second year they'll build the foundation, and then the third year they start, building, and so on. If it happens over many years or more than 1 year for future usage, okay, of course the jahez will not be used, it'll just be stored. And the same thing with the house, it won't be lived in until it is built and completed. So what is the hukum in regards to that? So the general hukum is that expenses made for future years are not deductible. They are like savings, that you can have as many savings as you want and as much as you want. However, you have to understand, of course, it has to be within the standards of living here. The expenses basically made for future years are not deductible because they are not things that are used during that year. So they're not for that year. However, the Maraji and Samahat Sayyid al-Sistani, Hafidahullah, has given an exception to this, and this is the wording of that exception, which we'll see for a number of questions. If it is appropriate for him, as per his status, it is something reasonable, and conventional norms, is in accordance to his conventional norms where he lives. What is appropriate for him? To exert the effort in obtaining these things beforehand, such that if he wouldn't do so, he will be seen in the conventional norms and conventional culture of that place that he has been negligent or careless, ghafil of his duties to his family, and he has been disdainful of their future. He doesn't care about their future. If that is what is going to be seen if one doesn't do so, and also it is against his social status to be seen in such a manner, then these expenses will be regarded as expenses for the same year, and thus they will be deductible. So have a look at the wording yourself. Everyone has to judge for himself or herself and see whether this applies or not. And one has to be honest. It is between you and God, and you have to see whether it applies. If not, if this doesn't apply, this exception doesn't apply, then you should pay the khums from those savings that you are accumulating for future things that you have to buy in the future or complete in the future and use in the future. Yeah. So this takes us to the next question of gradual long-term savings, okay, for future large expenses. So I don't want to buy things gradually, because the first question was about expenses over many years. I'm going to get something first in 1 year, then the next thing in the next year, and so on over many years. Here it's about saving. It's there. The money is there. I'm saving up for a large expense in the future, such as a children's marriage or buying a house. We all want to buy a house, so we have these savings. But of course, it's going to take several years, for example, for us to get to that state where we can buy a house. Are those savings liable for khums, or are they exempted? The same thing applies. Okay, all savings are subject to khums. Whatever you save at the end of the year is subject to khums. However, and we have the same paragraph here, if it is appropriate, it is according to conventional norms to have these savings, such that if he doesn't do so, he's going to be seen to be negligent or careless of his duties to his family and his dependents, and disdainful of their future, and it is against his social status to be seen in such a manner, then these savings will be regarded as expenses for the same year, because these are necessary expenses for that year. The usage technically and practically will be much later in years in the future, but for the purposes of khums, these are expenses for that year, and they will be deductible. So it's the same exception. So what's important is that the things that we buy, for them to be clear of khums and that no khums is liable on them, they have to be used. So we have all this long list of things that I've mentioned: food and drink, clothing, etc., etc. They have to be used. Not used incomplete, but it needs to be used in a level that is considerable. Whether it is gifted or whether you have bought it. And a minimal usage is sufficient, but not so minimal that you're just gonna, for example, if you bought a book, you open a page, just read just to get away from khums, you're just gonna read a page, or do something very arbitrarily and just use it just for the sake of escaping khums. That won't apply here. There has to be a real need for it, or a use of it, and you're using it. And this will depend on what it is. Okay, there is no one particular rule which tells us, or this anything that you buy has to be used 3 times or 5 times or 10 times or 100 times. It is all in regards to what the thing is. It could be something that is, for example, if you buy a suit for the days of wiladat, or for a wedding. For weddings, when you want to go to the weddings, they're not for normal use, and that is fine, because the style of the dress, its use is in this way. However, if it is so if it is used only once or twice a year, then that is sufficient. Okay? But if there's something that is more normal usage, maybe one use will not be enough. Okay, so there needs to be more of a use of it, so that it is regarded as being considerably used. Otherwise, if it's left unused or less than minimally used, then one will need to pay khums on that. And as a third bullet point here, I have mentioned that during that year, let's say I've bought something, there's something there, let's say clothing for children, and the owner, the parents, they have seen that the child has grown out of it and it will definitely not be used. Or let's say there are toys, the child has grown out of those toys. So whether they've grown out of the toys or the clothes, the parents decide that it is no longer to be used, and the year in which they have bought it isn't over yet. That khums date is yet to come, and they have made that decision. They don't have to make a decision. They can say, we'll leave it here. Maybe we can use it for the next child or something. And they haven't made that decision that it will no longer be used. That's fine. But if they have made that decision, even after having used it, okay, it has been used, but they have made that decision not to use it any further within its first year, then it will be liable for khums as well. Another mas'ala is about getting things ahead of time. Sometimes we want to buy something, we know we won't use it this year, this khums year, we will use it the next khums year. Is this liable for khums or not? Basically, the hukum is that if somebody buys precautionary items, and they're reasonable, such as a spare tire for the car. It could be you haven't used that spare tire. You never got a puncture, nothing really happened to the tires that are on the 4 tires on the car. So you never had to use a spare tire, it doesn't matter. It's a reasonable precautionary item that isn't coincidentally used, and that is fine. It's not liable for khums. Or like a fire extinguisher, or for bedding. Let's say you've got bedding or other items that you have got for guests, but they are not used. For example, there were no guests during that year because of coronavirus or for any other reason. You will not need to pay khums on that because they were reasonable things. They were reasonable precautionary items that you bought, and you are not to be blameworthy in that. And the next part of this is that if someone buys something which was desired, I want it, okay, but I never got around to using it. Okay, it's just coincidentally it's just for me like a book. There's a set of books that I bought and I just never got around to using them, i.e. reading them. So in this situation, there are 2 scenarios. That if they could have been procured and obtained or bought without difficulty later on, and I had an idea that I don't use it, I don't really need it now. I can possibly buy it later when I do need it, or when I do want it, when I do want to actually use it and, for example, read the books, then it is liable for khums. But if I have bought it because, for example, there is going to be some difficulty and hardship when I do actually want to use it later. For example, there's a sale on now. I don't need it now, but later on I won't be able to afford it. Or I'm in the country now and I won't be able to get it when I'm out the country. And I'll be outside the country later on when I do need it, next year or whenever. So when there are difficulties and hardships of procuring it, when one actually anticipates using it, then that item will not be liable for any khums. And then quickly there, if you're getting things in sets and packs, for example, you're getting a whole tea set, but you only want the cups and not the actual teapot, or there's certain things that you want and certain things that you don't want, but you can get it in sets and packs. Are the unused parts of those sets and packs liable for khums? The answer is yes, if the item you actually wanted to use could have been bought separately. But if you couldn't, for example, if you want to buy a set of books, volumes 1 to 10, for instance, and you only really want to read for the time being volume 1, but you can't get volume 1 independently and separately from all the other volumes, and so you have to buy the whole set. So in such a circumstance, you don't have to pay any khums on that. In regards to the loan, that sometimes brothers and sisters feel that because there is a loan, just having a loan will make one free of liability of any khums. There is an exception to that, which I believe is on the minds of the listeners and the viewers. I'll get to that inshallah, but generally speaking, simply having a debt, a loan, does not make the obligation of khums disappear. The khums liability is still there. However, if a loan is taken, and this is the mas'ala, that if a loan is taken to purchase an item which is a deductible expense, so you go through that list, of course, many of the things, if not all of them, will be a deductible expense for food, or if you want to buy some kind of exercise machine, a treadmill, let's say, or you want to get you want to have a new kitchen done, or there's any kind of real expenses, deductible expenses that you want to get a loan for, and that is something that is used that year, then the balance of that loan would be deductible from the surplus income of that year. So I'll give you an example, as mentioned here, that if I want to buy a car, and the car, the amount of the loan that I need to buy the car is £5,000. So I'm using the pounds here because I live in England. So if it's £5,000, that's the amount of the loan that I need to buy a car for my usage, for my personal usage. So if in the year in which I have taken that loan, I have a surplus income, a savings, at the year-end balance of £8,000, okay, that is from the income from that year, he can deduct £5,000 from that £8,000, and therefore only £3,000 will be subject to khums. So whatever 20% of £3,000 is, so I believe £600, that will be £600 will be payable as khums. £5,000 is let off. However, if the surplus income is less than the loan amount, for example, if he has a surplus income of £3,000, this is less than the £5,000 that he has taken as a loan and he's bought in a car with. What he can do is deduct the £5,000 loan amount, and therefore he's going to be in the negative. This is going to be minus 2,000 now, and therefore no khums will be liable for him that year. And this is the original mas'ala. This is a fatwa that His Eminence Ayatollah Al-Udhma As-Sayyid As-Sistani Hafidhahullah has had since the beginning. But this only was limited for the first year, the year in which he bought it and he got the loan and bought the item. However, there is a new ruling now, and in that ruling, what has happened is that His Eminence Samahat Sayyid Sistani has said that this doesn't just apply for the first year. As we saw in this example, in the previous example, there is a -2, the surplus income is less than the loan amount, because the loan was 5,000, his income was 3,000, no khums liable for him. If in the next year he only has £2,000, his surplus income is only £2,000, there's no khums that year as well, as long as the car is still in his usage. So in this way, the new ruling is allowing that loan to be brought forward year after year until it has completely been taken care of with the surplus income that has accumulated over the years. So this is what happens now, that if the surplus income was less than the loan balance on the khums date, then the deduction can be passed to the next year and every subsequent year after that as well, until the cumulative surplus income reaches the amount of the outstanding loan balance. Okay, and this is with the condition that the item bought, it's a car or a house, a mortgage with a house, or whatever it is. It could be a £500 loan to buy a computer or anything. As long as it is a deductible expense, it's still in personal use in each of the years that this is being applied. Okay? In the year in which this is no longer applied, this thing is not in use anymore, for example, it has broken down or I has sold it or whatever, then this will cease to be the case. You have to stop this application in this way. I'll show you a few examples. Now, the simple example is that there are no repayments. You have been given a loan from a friend of £5,000 for general expenses, for your household expenses. You buy some furniture, for instance. So he has given you £5,000. And he said, pay it back to me in 10 years' time, down the line when you can. So there are no monthly repayments or yearly repayments that has been set out. And this is the way loans normally worked in the past, especially smaller loans. So we see here that if you get the loan in 2020 and then all the way to 2027, I have made this chart until then for 8 years. We see that the loan balance is what, £5,000, because I haven't paid it back. It's still upon me to pay that £5,000 over these years. And this is my yearly surplus income for each year. And it varies, of course. And this is a cumulative surplus income. So we add it on, we keep adding it on, because where the loan balance was £5,000, we see the surplus income £500. There's no khums on that £500. And then the next year I make a saving of £1,000. Now the cumulative surplus income is 1,500. Again, it's less than 5,000. So there's no khums for that year. And this will continue. We'll keep adding the surplus income until it gets to £5,000 or above. So we see in 2026, in this example, I got a cumulative surplus income of £5,100. So £5,000 is still deductible. So all of these amounts that I have received for these years, all the way up to 2026, it's going to be khums free, because this £5,000 is a deductible expense. And then when it goes above it by, in this example, £100, that's the amount that is liable for khums, that's subject to khums and £20 will then be paid as 20% of £100. And then the next year, that process is over. I still haven't paid the loan back, but the surplus income, I have £1,000, and I will need to just pay the 20% of £1,000, which is £200 in the usual way. This is if there are no repayments to be made. This is a simple scenario. However, let's take it up a notch and give it some complication where I have, for example, bought a car with a loan of £8,000 over 4 years. Therefore, I'm paying £2,000 every year from 2020 to 2023. Okay, and as we see here, we have a loan balance in 2020. If I got the loan of £8,000, I paid back 2,000. In the first year, I have a loan balance by the Khums year date of £6,000. Okay, it's not 8, it's £6,000. That's the loan balance. The surplus income is £3,000. This is less than that, therefore there is no Khums liable. And then the next year I've paid back another 2,000. The loan balance is decreasing while the cumulative surplus income is increasing. And then where they meet, and this is where in the year 2020, where the amount, the loan balance is £2,000 and the cumulative surplus income has crossed that, and therefore the amount that needs to be paid, actually it's in 2021, sorry, my mistake, is in 2021 we see that there's a loan balance of £4,000 and I have 4,500 cumulative surplus income, including in the first year and the second year. So £500 is above it. And once we cross that threshold, or where the two meet, the decreasing loan amount and the increasing surplus income, where they meet, that is when the process ends. And if there is any loss in any particular year, it will be regarded as a zero. You won't be able to deduct it. You won't deduct it. It will just be counted as a zero. So the cumulative surplus income will not increase that year. So there's a lot of digits, a lot of numbers. Inshallah, it's clear, and we'll move forward to the next example. And this is an example of a mortgage, a 25-year mortgage with a loan of £250,000. So this means that let's say if I buy a house for £300,000, I've paid £50,000 as an advance payment, as a down payment. So there's a loan of £250,000, and we are assuming, of course, that all these years, all the way up to however long this takes, let's say 2040, I'm living in that house. It's house in my use. Every year I'm paying back £10,000. Of course, this figure will vary depending on your mortgage company and the interest rates and so on. But however, the interest rates will not affect this as such, because the interest is not a part of the equation. What you need to do is, when you get your end of the year mortgage statement of how much you have paid on the principal amount, that's what we're looking at, the principal amount. The interest is there that you're paying, and that is deductible. That's a deductible expense, but it's not part of these calculations. So you are paying £10,000 back every year for 25 years. And I'm not sure if you can see this, the next column is the loan balance. So that is, of course, gradually decreasing from 240 to 230 to 220,000 pounds, and so on until it gets to zero. But does this mean that there's no khums during this period all the way up to the end? No, that is not what it means. You'll have to look at the surplus income. Yes, this is decreasing, and this is the cumulative surplus income in the next column is increasing. And this can vary from person to person. So if somebody has earned a lot of money in the beginning, and that threshold is reached, then the process ends. But as we see here in this example, the savings are 3,000, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, just these small amounts every year until he gets to this particular year, which is what? The year 2040. In the year 2040, his loan balance has gone down to £40,000, and his cumulative surplus income has reached £40,500. Therefore, he's reached that threshold. He's gone over the outstanding loan amount by how much? By £500, and therefore he needs to pay the khums of £100. And this is when the process ends, and he or she will now be paying khums as normal on the income for that year. But there is one important point that we have to bear in mind before we move on, and I end this, that when this process ends, because remember, you're also making repayments. All these £10,000 that you're making as repayments, they are deductible expenses as well. On top of that, you are not paying khums on these amounts, which is the surplus, the cumulative surplus income. And when we get to the point where that cumulative surplus income meets the loan balance or crosses it, then these repayments that you are making in the following years, so here it's going to be in 2041, 2042, and 2043, the last three repayments that you are making, this will be not amongst the deductible expenses. So when you pay £10,000, you have to pay £2,000 as khums as well. Because at the end of this whole period, the bigger picture is that the amount that is khums free will be the same. It will be the amount of the loan. Whether you do it in the normal way, where you see, every year you just make the repayments, which are deductible expenses, and then the surplus income, we would just pay khums from it every year as normal. The total amount that has become khums free are the total amounts, or the total amount of all the repayments that you have made, which amounts to, in this example, £250,000, if we don't apply this process. And at the end of this process, when we do apply it, it is the same amount, where no more than £240,000 has been exempted. £250,000. So in the bigger picture, you're not any better off or worse off. It's just that there is some relief in the beginning, while later, once the process ends, there will be an extra amount of khums that you'll have to pay on the repayments that you are making, because those will no longer be deductible expenses. So I hope this has clarified the process of how the new fatwa of Agha Sistani works. And if there are any questions, inshallah, we'll look into those. Just a final note on what we do and how we pay, what we do with the khums, how we pay it, and how we deal with it. So with the Sahm al-Imam alayhi salam, this is of course the haqq of the Imam of the time, and the responsibility is with the marji', and so it must be given to him or his wakil or someone with an ijazah, and you can seek an ijazah. If there is a kind of a project, an Islamic project or the like, then you can ask the marja' or the wakil to have an ijazah for that particular project. And generally speaking, Sahm al-Imam alayhi salam is used for two main objectives: the fulfilling of the needs of religious believers. If there is someone who is poor, who is needy, who is destitute, who is in need of financial help, then Sahm al-Imam can be used for that, and also for the propagation and the spreading and the teaching of the religion of Islam and the Sharia and all the aspects of Islam, whatever is related to it. Sahm al-Imam alayhi salam will be a part of that. And also a final note here about the necessity of getting a receipt from the office of Ayatollah Sayyid Sistani, Hafidhullah. With regards to Sahm al-Sadat, His Eminence has allowed us to dispense with it as we wish. Not as we wish completely, but with the following rules. Okay, first of all, that the recipient is a Hashimi. Okay, there is more preference given to an Alawi Sayyid, and particularly for the Fatimi Alawi Sayyids, who we normally call Sayyids. The second condition, they must be poor. What does it mean to be poor? He doesn't have enough income for his and his family's expenses. Okay, and there are certain conditions regards to a stranded traveler, someone who he might be rich back home, but here he doesn't have anything. He's been robbed. He's been, he's lost his money, and therefore there are certain conditions that apply to that, which doesn't really apply nowadays with stranded travelers. This is a condition related to the olden times. Thirdly, his poverty shouldn't be due to laziness or life choices, while the ability to earn a living is there. Must be Shi'athna Ashari, he mustn't be one who spends it on haram things. He mustn't be one who is Tariqus Salat, or he is Sharibul Khamar, he doesn't pray, drinks alcohol, or in any other form he is an open sinner. And it cannot be paid by someone whom one is obliged and obligated by the Sharia to maintain. Okay, so if, for example, a person has a Sayyid wife, it's his obligation to provide for her, and therefore he can't just pass the Sahm Sadat to her. So this is the end of this presentation. I couldn't and I can't go through the whole chapter of Khums with all its details in the space of an hour. But inshallah, if there are any further questions that we don't get round to now, for about 20 or 30 minutes, inshallah, we have time for questions. But if you are unable to ask your questions, or if you get a question later on, you can email me those questions, and inshallah I'll respond. And I suppose we'll open the floor for any questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Shaykh. That was quite intense. We have a few questions. First question is, my wife isn't working. However, I send her a fixed sum of money every month. Would she have Khums date for each payment?
Yes, she will have a khums date for each payment, because simply for the fact that she doesn't work.
Okay. The second question is Khums payable on company shares that are held?
Company shares, there are certain extra details. If you notice, I haven't gone into business khums.
Yes.
because there are other details there. But if you own shares in a company, it is generally an investment, and investments uh, have to be made either with money that is mukhammas, yani it's because of course I haven't mentioned this, but it's important to know that once you pay khums from an amount, it's no longer liable for khums. It can be with you for the rest of your life. It'll never be subject to khums again. So if you have some mukhammas money and you invest it, there's no khums on that. But if it is not mukhammas money and you invest it, then according to Abbas Sistani, you'll have to pay khums. And as an obligatory precaution, you can't wait to the khums year date. You should pay it when you actually make the investment.
Okay. Thank you. We have another question. I have to pay Khums on £500, which will be £100 Khums. However, I did not pay the Khums and realized a year later. Is there any sort of penalty to pay?
Now, Allah forgives those, things that we do out of forgetfulness. So there's no kafara. All you have to do is just pay it as soon as possible. Okay, so just pay it off as soon as possible, and inshallah, the delay will be forgiven, and you are fine after that.
Okay. To add on top of that question, what if there is someone who either intentionally or unintentionally does not pay Khums?
I mean, if it is unintentionally, there are different scenarios. For example, whether it is out of justified ignorance or unjustified ignorance. And nowadays, there isn't really any scope for justified ignorance. There's no justification of ignorance.
Yeah.
And such a person who is intentionally, therefore, so there's someone who is without any justification, not paying any khums, it is akin to him intentionally not paying any khums. And that is the scenario that we live in today. And if that is the case, then and you do want to now pay the khums, I'm not sure exactly what the question is. Is it that the person does want to now pay the khums? If that is so, then
So,
he needs to make, go back over the years of the past and figure out how much khums is liable. And for that, he can contact an alim or the wakil of the marja and figure these things out as well.
okay, so what if someone does not pay Khums at all? What are the implications on them? Is it a sin? Is it
Yes,
become
it's a
haram?
sin.
Or
He's eating the haqq. I mean, we have just gone through the
yeah,
days of Ayam Fatimiyya salamullah alayha, and we mourn for the oppression that she suffered. And one of the great oppressions that she suffered was the ghasb of her haqq. And if we are not paying khums, we are doing the ghasb of the haqq of her children, of the Sadat. And there is a hadith that the Sayyid who hasn't received his share, he will stand up on the day of Hashr, on the day of judgment, and he will say, "Where is my haqq?" Because it's something that you are eating, you are stealing it. This is ghasb. And in the same way, you are stealing the haqq of the Imam, the awaited Imam, Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif. So this is something quite serious, and the repercussions, as I mentioned at the beginning, is quite serious as well. That when we want to ensure the taharat of the purity of our wealth, that the clothes that we wear when we pray, the ihram that we wear when we go for Hajj, in all of these things are then batil if it's from money that is ghasbi, that is maghsoob. So there are great repercussions from failure to paying the khums.
Okay. We move on to the next question. Uh, the viewer is asking, say you go to an exhibition and get a bag of freebies like books, bookmarks, religious or otherwise. Are we expected to find out the value of that and pay khums on it?
Yes, basically, if it remains unused, you have to figure out a value for it. If you're not sure, I mean, these small things, normally one would just pay a bit, be safe and pay a bit extra. But basically, if he is not sure whether it is £2 or let's say he says it's between £2 and £3 for this particular book, if I were to sell it on eBay or something. Okay, so this is what he has to figure out. And it doesn't have, there's no exact science to this because, again, the market is not completely predictable. But if he has a reasonable estimate, that is fine. He can go by it. And if there is a lower figure, this is a higher figure, this is a range, he can just go according to the lower figure.
Okay. The next question I think is similar to what we just said is if you're given or if you buy religious books and keep them for reference but haven't actually sat down and read them, is khums applicable here?
If the nature of those books is that they are to be read, then there is khums liable on it. However, if the intention was that it's a reference book, and I'm not going to read it from cover to cover. I'm going to, let's say, find something and then look into it, but just it's like if it's similar to the scenario that I have bought bedding, cushions, and other things for the house for guests, special kind of things for guests, and then I haven't received any guests for the whole year, and these things were reasonable for what my status, for what I do. For example, like if someone is a student and he buys reference books, then this is possibly the case. It's something that one has to judge personally and subjectively, see whether it is this kind of thing, whether it's something reasonable, but it's just coincidentally, it so happens that because of certain circumstances, I haven't been able to refer to the book otherwise, but for those circumstances, I would have done so.
Son, thank you. Okay, so another question is in regards to paying khums. Is it as simple as looking at the balance on your bank statement at the beginning of the year and at the end, and then determining whether the end value is higher and you pay khums on the difference, or is it more complex than that?
Well, this is where you need to start. If this is for someone who's working, yeah,
Yeah.
there's one particular home state. So there's no accounting that needs to take place over the year, during the year. All that one needs to look at is the bank balance and see what is there, and then also deduct what is mukhammas from previous years. What is prudent so that no one sort of gets confused. It's open another account, a savings account or some other kind of account for mukhammas money. Put it there so there's no confusion. But if over and above that, you need to account for any cash that you have in your wallet, in the house lying around. Even sadaqah money that you have put away that you haven't been able to give yet because it hasn't been given. When it's given, it's given. Okay, when it's in the hands of the faqir or the orphan or the like. So all of that needs to be taken into account apart from that. And then all those things which are unused, okay, if it has a value. Certain places, for example, if I have a bag of 20 kilo bag of flour. Now in the UK, for instance, we will not be able to sell that flour once it's opened. or maybe we can. I'm not sure. So we have to figure this out. But in the east, maybe in Pakistan, you can sell that flour. So if there's anything that remains in this way that is that has a value and it hasn't been used, then it needs to be calculated as well. So it's not so simple. There are further calculations that do need to take place.
Yeah, so I mean, there is a question that had come about in regards to food rations. For example, my Khums date may be the 31st of December, and I buy
Yeah. Sorry, we've lost you. Okay, while we wait for the brother to come back, I got the question. Um, okay, we'll continue, inshallah. So the question is about something that you have bought, like food rations, just before the Khums date. So after the Khums date comes, well, at the Khums date, if there are things that are unused, Khums will need to be payable on that. And the in that kind of situation is like to avoid paying that Khums. You can then you sort of wait a few days for the Khums year to pass by, and then pay the buy the things afterwards. Um,
Sorry about that, viewers. I think we have one more question here.
okay.
In regards to someone who is earning through maybe corruption or cheating, and the income they earn gets mixed up with the halal earning. Maybe the 31st of December. So how then does that person determine what amount Khums is payable?
Yeah, this is part of um, the subjects of Khums, which we never went into today. Is when the halal becomes mixed with the haram in your property, and you don't know what belongs to who. You've done cheating, you've taken people's money and things like that. You don't know how to return it. It's all mixed up. So really, generally speaking, what you do is you pay khums from everything, and that will purify you, and that will put you in the clear then after that. But what
Yeah.
can be returned has to be returned. So this is the answer to that in brief.
I think there's a request anyway. Someone's made a request if we can have a separate session on Khums that apply to businesses. So maybe we can discuss and see when it's convenient.
Yes, inshallah.
And inshallah, we can plan a session
And,
specifically for
yeah,
businesses.
absolutely, inshallah.
Yeah.
No
Okay. And
So
then I think there was one.
the
There was
question
one
you
more.
before I've answered in your
Yes. Yeah. There's one, and this has been talk between different people in regards to. I know it maybe it's similar to what you answered regards to the food rations, but what about perfumes? Because there was someone a Zakir, who said that the perfume that remains at the end of your khumsiyah is khums is payable on that remainder. I don't know. Can you shed some light on that, please?
Yes, if it is something, again, you go back to the principle of does it have value if I was to sell it? And in certain parts of the world, if you are able to sell it, it's going to be pennies. So what you can do is at the end of the year, the home state, have a ballpark figure of, let's say, another £10 for all these small bits and pieces that might attract the liability of khums. And you can then sort of be free of liability and be sure of that in that way. Because in today's lifestyles, we own a lot of things, in our possessions. In the olden days, things were simpler, and there weren't many possessions for the regular working class people or the middle class people. So it's in this day and age, we have so many possessions that it does complicate the issue. But if that perfume has a sale price, then it will have khums on it. Inshallah, that
Okay, thank you for
clarifies.
that. Yeah, I think that should clarify. One last one, I think we'll take the last one before we end.
Yes.
Regarding the rule on mortgages that you explained, so essentially, based on your example, for a good 20 years, if the cumulative surplus income does not match the loan value, then no khums is payable.
Yes, basically, yes.
So when does this apply from? And what happens to those who have paid khums during those years whilst not being aware of this rule?
Well, not being aware of this rule, well, the khums that has been paid, there's no refund for that. What one can do is, if the house is still under one's possession and personal use, he can start this year and have the loan balance at the end of that year. What is the loan balance then, and continue from henceforth.
Okay, and that person would then need to have an accurate figure, so based on accurate calculations as opposed to just estimating, right? Because obviously you have to remove the interest value from that repayment.
You got to remove the whole interest side of the payments. Just look at the principal amount, look at your income, and do the calculations. So you got to be accurate.
Okay, I think we're all good with the questions.
Okay.
I'd like to thank you, Shaykh,
Again,
for
yeah,
taking your time,
not a
and
problem.
thank all
Again, if
the
there are any
viewers.
further questions, and my email is on the screen, and I'll be happy to answer any further questions.
Yes, so to all the viewers, if you have any specific questions, please email the Shaykh, and inshallah we shall plan on another session, maybe specific to homes that apply to business. So to all the viewers and to yourself, Shaykh, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you
And
for
we
having me.
hope to be live again in the near future.
Inshallah. Jazakumullah.
Inshallah. Okay, Jazakallah. Fi amanillah.
Fi amanillah.